You're watching the History Fellow channel. In this video we're looking at Operation Claymore. Operation Claymore was a British and Norwegian commando raid on the Lofoten Islands of northern Norway during the Second World War. The Lofoten Islands were an important centre for the production of fish oil and glycerine used in the German war economy. The landings were carried out on the 4th of March 1941 by 500 men of No. 3 Commando, No. 4 Commando and a Royal Engineers section, and 52 men from the Norwegian Independent Company 1. Supported by the 6th Destroyer Flotilla and 2 troop transports of the Royal Navy, the force landed almost unopposed. The original plan was to avoid contact with German forces and inflict the maximum of damage to German-controlled industry. They achieved their objective of destroying fish oil factories and some 3,600 tons of oil and glycerine. The force returned with some 228 German prisoners, 314 Norwegian recruits, and a number of Quisling regime collaborators. Through naval gunfire and demolition parties, 18,000 tons of shipping was sunk. Perhaps the most significant outcome of the raid was the capture of a set of rotor wheels for the Enigma machine and its code books from the German armed trawler Krebs. German naval codes could therefore be deciphered at Bletchley Park, providing the intelligence needed to allow Allied convoys to avoid U-boat concentrations. In the aftermath of the evaluation of the operation differed, with the British, especially Winston Churchill, and the Special Operations Executive. These deemed it a success. In the eyes of the British, the main value of such actions was to tie up large German forces in occupation duties in Norway. Martin Ling and the other Norwegians involved were more doubtful of the value of such raids on Norwegian coast, but were not told of the value of the seized cryptographic information. Ongoing analysis of the period documents suggests that commando raids of this type were a cover for so-called pinch raids, designed to capture German cryptographic equipment without the enemy realizing that was the true purpose of the raids. After the British Expeditionary Force had been expelled from Europe at Dunkirk in 1940, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill called for a force to be assembled and equipped to inflict casualties on the Germans and bolster British morale. Churchill told the Joint Chiefs of Staff to propose measures for an offensive against German-occupied Europe, and stated that they must be prepared with specially trained troops of the Hunter class who can develop a reign of terror down the enemy coast. Lieutenant Colonel Dudley Clark had already submitted such a proposal to General Sir John Dill and the Chief of the Imperial General Staff. Dill, aware of Churchill's intentions, approved Clark's proposal. 3 weeks later, the first commando raid, Operation Collar, took place. The raiders failed to gather any intelligence or damage any German equipment. Their only success was killing 2 German sentries. The commandos came under operational control of the Combined Operations Headquarters. The man initially selected as the commander was Admiral Roger Keyes, a veteran of the Gallipoli campaign and the Zeebrugge raid in the First World War. In 1940, the call went out for volunteers from among the Serbian army soldiers within certain formations still in Britain and men of the disbanded divisional independent companies, originally raised from the territorial army divisions, which had seen service in Norway. In November 1940, the new army units were organised into special service brigades under Brigadier J.C. Hayden, with 4 special service battalions. By the autumn of 1940, More than 2,000 men had volunteered for commando training, and the Special Service Brigade now consisted of 12 units, which were all called commandos. After an inauspicious start, the first large-scale commando raid was to be on the Lofoten Islands, just off the Norwegian coast, inside the Arctic Circle, about 900 miles from Britain. Once at the islands, the raiders would be landed at 4 small ports to destroy fish oil producing factories. All the oil produced was being shipped to Germany, which extracted the glycerin, a vital ingredient in the manufacture of high explosives. The commandos would be transported to the islands aboard 2 new infantry landing ships, escorted by 4 Tribal-class and 1 L-class destroyer of the 6th Destroyer Flotilla. The commander of the raid was Rear Admiral Lewis Keppel Hamilton. The objectives of Operation Claymore were threefold. The Royal Navy were asked to safely escort the transports carrying the landing force to the islands and back. While there, they were to destroy or capture any German shipping or Norwegian shipping working for the Germans and provide naval gunfire support for the landing forces. The naval forces taking part were the escorts from the 6th Destroyer Flotilla, HMS Somali, Bedouin, Tartar, Eskimo and Legion, under the command of Captain C. Caslin. 2 newly converted landing ships, HMS Queen Emma and HMS Princess Beatrix, were to transport the landing force. The landing force was provided by the Special Service Brigade. The commandos taking part were 250 all ranks from number 3 Commando and 250 all ranks of number 4 Commando. They were supported by a section of Royal Engineers of number 55 Field Company and 4 officers and 48 other ranks of the Norwegian Independent Company 1. The landing force were to destroy the oil-producing facilities in the ports of Stamsund, Henningsvær, Svalbard and Bretsnes, engage the German garrison and attempt to take prisoners of war found in the area. They were also to detain any supporters of the Norwegian Quisling party and persuade the local population to leave the island and join the Norwegian forces. The force began its assembly at Scapa Flow in the Orkney Islands on the 21st of February 1941 and remained there for almost a week, before leaving for Norway just after midnight on March 1st, 1941. The landing force was distributed amongst the ships. Headquarters Special Service Brigade were transported on Somali. Number 4 Commando, which had been assigned landings at Svalbard and Bretsnes, were on board at Queen Emma. Number 3 Commando, which had been assigned landings at Stamsund and Henningsvær, were on board Princess Beatrix. The Royal Engineers and Norwegian forces were divided between both the landing ships. The time they spent on Scapa Flow was used getting acquainted with the transport ships and the landing craft assault they would be using to reach the shore. The problems the Navy perceived providing gunfire support was also discussed, as the destroyers would not be able to approach closer than 1 mile to shore owing to the shallows. Because of this, the commandos were trained to rely on their own weapons to provide covering fire and support each other from their landing craft. Plans were also made for them to look after themselves in case the destroyers were called away to deal with a naval threat, which included every man being ordered to take enough rations to last for at least 48 hours ashore. The Naval Task Force, known by the code name Rebel, left Scapa Flow and headed towards the Faroes. They berthed in the Skarlsvár at 1900 hours on the 1st of March 1941 to take on fuel. Refueling took 5 hours, and the Naval Task Force headed north towards the Arctic to avoid detection by German air and sea patrols. They then turned east and headed towards Norway. They arrived at the Lofoten Islands just before 4 a.m. on the 4th of March 1941. Upon entering the Vestfjorden, found the harbour's navigational lights illuminated, which they took as a sign that they had achieved surprise. The original plan was for simultaneous landings at 6:30 a.m, but upon arrival this was postponed by 15 minutes to avoid landing in darkness. All commandos were ashore by 6:50. The attack was largely unopposed, apart from 4 rounds fired by the German armed trawler Krebs at HMS Somali before she was sunk. Damage and the civilian casualties occurred at Bedouin, or as Bedouin sank the Norwegian passenger ship DS Mira, which entered the scene of the action. The landing forces sank the merchant ships Hamburg, Passage, Felix, Elnau, Ryson, Ando, Grotto, and Bernhard Schultz, which amounted to 18,000 tons. The force that landed at Stamsons destroyed the Lofoten's cod boiling plant. 2 factories were destroyed at Henningsvær and 13 at Svolsvær. In total, about 800,000 imperial gallons of fish oil and paraffin were set on fire. The soldiers captured 228 prisoners, including 7 from the Kriegsmarine, 3 from the Heer, 15 from the Luftwaffe, 2 from the Schutzstaffel, and 147 from the Merchant Navy and 14 civilians. Perhaps the most significant result of the raid was the capture of a set of rotor wheels for the Enigma cyber machine and its codebooks. These were rescued from the sinking Krebs. Lower Commander Lieutenant Hans Kuppenfinger threw his machine, one of only 3 known to be on the island, overboard minutes before he was killed. Captured documents showed the Kriegsmarine home waters key for February and also helped solve the April traffic, which was sent between 1st of March and 10th of May. Their capture enabled Bletchley Park to read all German naval codes for some time and provided the intelligence needed to allow Allied convoys to avoid U-boat concentrations. By 1 o'clock, both the infantry landing ships, Princess Beatrix and Queen Emma, had embarked all their troops and were ready to sail. With them came 300 volunteers for the Free Norwegian Forces in Britain. After the raid, the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, issued a memo. To all concerned, my congratulations on this very satisfactory operation. Claymore was the first of 12 commando raids directed against Norway during the Second World War. The Germans eventually increased their number of troops in Norway, and by 1944, the German garrison was 370,000 men strong. A standard British infantry division in 1944 had 18,347 men. Number 3 and Number 4 commandos became part of the 1st Special Service Brigade and took part in the Normandy landings in June 1944. If you found the information in this video informative, please feel free to give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. My thanks to you for listening and watching this video.